Hey everyone, welcome to At the Root of It. And today I have my friend, Kevin. Kevin, would you like to give maybe a quick introduction to the audience, maybe some background so that they'll have a little bit of context and when we continue our discussion?
Yeah. Hanisha and I, we know we've been working together for 10 years at a tech company called Box. This is unheard of, being at a tech company that long. Before Box, actually came right out of college and did a daring trip across America, across the east to the west coast by car to get to California without knowing I was going to be working at this company. So um, yeah, that's kind of how I got to the West Coast. Before that, going further back, my family's actually German and American. I was born in Germany. We lived there for around 4 or 5 years, and then moved to the U.S. In the '90s. Um, my dad's American. He's from Cleveland, Ohio. My mom's from Hamburg, Germany, and that kind of shaped a lot of my experiences in life, coming from that kind of family background, and grew up in a town called Rochester, New York, which at the time was a booming city that had Kodak and Xerox in it. And this was right around the time that both of them kind of fell flat. Like, my dad had this great idea, like, oh, Rochester, it's like the new Silicon Valley of the East Coast, and then that's when digital film came about and destroyed Kodak, and then obviously like computers kind of took over Xerox. So um, early on, like Rochester was kind of a changing landscape. Kind of leads into the expectations theme of this whole podcast. And growing up there was a very interesting experience. A lot of folks there are very like from Rochester, grew up or multi generational from there. So they really didn't know what to make of me and my brothers when we came to school. They were like, "Oh, they're German, but they don't look German as to what we expect Germans to look like." So we kind of had to adapt in that environment, and that really did shape the way that I am today. We'll get into it about like how culture impacts uh, our values or expectations. Um, yeah, that's just a little bit of blurb about me.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, today's episode is on expectations. So we can dive right into it. When you hear that word, what what are the expectations behind expectation?
Yeah. I recently, like hearing the word expectation, I immediately think of the expectations that adults put on kids. Like, I don't know why that's like front of mind um, lately. It's just it's interesting to know, like, to see how parents talk to their children, what they expect of their children, and as you get older, you realize like your adults are children themselves, and the things that they expected from you were kind of a little ridiculous at times. Um, that's kind of like what really comes to my mind when I think of expectations. Of course, it goes into relationships, whether your significant others or your coworkers and stuff. But yeah, that's kind of front of mind.
Well, since you kind of opened us up into context around the way you grew up and some of the context that you had in Rochester and being a child of immigrants, being the middle brother,
Yeah.
do you want to kind of highlight maybe where some of you feel these early expectations for you came from, as far as maybe ones that you now realize that adults may not should not have of children?
Yeah, I don't know if it could be a generational thing, like I don't know how it is for you, but my parents were very like the expectations of them. You were expected to grow up much earlier than you were, and expected to help out much sooner than kids really can handle. Um, given how much development you like have in your life, like um, I found that my like yeah early on I just feel like a lot of times adults will treat kids like little adults and expect no errors or mistakes or changing character. You're growing and you're like going through phases and hormonal changes and all these things, and then they have no idea. Like my parents, I would love to pass that back to you if your parents had the same expectation. They expected us to kind of fit in like immediately with everyone
Mm,
around us, and not really understood like not only are we from a different nationality. I have an interracial family that was very uncommon in the area I grew up in. So it was not the easiest to kind of fit in and like make friends at first. When I first moved in, I didn't even know the language to begin with. So they kind of like were blissfully unaware that this was going on. They were just like hoping, oh, they're just kids. They'll just play and get along and get together. As I know that you're like also European descent. Like I don't know if you experienced the same when you were growing up.
yeah, I mean, there was definitely a little bit of that. I would get a lot of questions around how does the school system work, and questions that, I mean, sometimes even like, like not business questions, but just like questions that had to do very situationally with being in America. And I was like, well, I don't know. And like, I would, not that I would try to get away with anything, but when it came to like report cards, things like that, like a lot of that is not synonymous with the way like my parents grew
Mm,
up.
yeah.
And so there wasn't like a direct, like going back to school night where the parents go in and talk to the teachers. I don't think that was a thing for them. So they were kind
Mm-hmm.
of confused as to like what this is, but I was expected to be the one to educate them
Yeah.
on what this was. And
And that's a tough spot to be in as a kid. You have to not only you're like just playing and like you trying to just grow up and learn what you need to learn for your classes, but at the same time kind of relay information to your parents about like how this whole thing is supposed to work.
yeah, and
That's fascinating.
I do consider myself lucky in the sense that both my parents obviously spoke English, and that helped considerably.
Mm,
I have heard from many friends, and others who had parents who don't speak English, and they're also
mm,
immigrants, and they are doing more complicated things like playing translator for
yeah.
their family. And those expectations are wild to me,
Hmm.
because that puts, as you mentioned, like a heavy burden to be the little adults when it's
Yeah.
for a point of convenience. It's not because it's actually a skill set that you should have as a child. It's like there's a skill set lacking in the adults, and they're utilizing their children as a way to plug that gap.
Hmm. Yeah. I'm lucky to say, well, like my father being American, like we didn't have many situations, but if my dad wasn't home and someone came to the door, my mom's like, could you answer it? I'm still learning English, or yeah, I kind of like relying on the kids, usually my older brother, to go and be the translator or figure out what's going on, and then we don't know what's going. Like we don't understand taxes or like who's coming to the door to check on the gas meter or
Exactly.
things like that. Like,
I think it's, you I know we've talked about this a little bit outside of this conversation, but I'd love to dive into how expectations drive you from the perspective of being the middle brother of three
mm,
brothers.
yeah. I feel like I've heard a lot of studies that say like the middle child's a troublemaker. Like that's the one that tries to find attention and stuff. That wasn't the case. Um, my older brother was a little bit of a troublemaker growing up, and I was kind of the even keel, like he's the responsible one. So the expectation growing up was that if
Ah,
I did anything that was considered like out of character to them, like out of character or like irresponsible, which kids and teenagers what they do all the time, they would be very like disappointed in me, and that was
mm,
always really tough to kind of play that role. And I think that kind of made me more of a like carefully. like if I go through any type of action or any type of like if I go through any type of decision, I'm always a little bit more careful about it, think more thoughtfully about it than I would than my brothers would, because I'm kind of looked at as the mediator or like the calm one in the family. Um, yeah,
And I know the expectations sounds like also were in line with kind of being the organizer, the one to bring
yeah,
things together. I know you are the one who's organized in the past, like your family vacations and things like that.
yeah, yeah. That was. It wasn't until like talking to you, I was like, wait, that isn't normal. That yeah, I'm the only one who's like guiding these, organizing them, and I always thought that was just something like, oh, I just want to help out, and I have the ability to do it, so might as well hop in. I would say also culturally, there's like even though we grew up in America, we had a very strong German cultural like influence in our upbringing.
Hmm.
Germany is very like personal responsibility and punctuality is a huge thing. Uh,
Oh, okay.
Massive punctuality like is a huge thing. I was always told growing up if you're on time you're late, and if you're early you're on time. And, like I remember my mom had everything planned every day. In Germany, I don't know if it is the same in the UK, but they would get paid monthly, which is here in the United States most folks get paid biweekly, and you really have to like spend your money appropriately. And things stores weren't just open all the time. Like they had adequate working hours, like they had siestas, or like they would go home during lunch. Like you had to really plan out the farmers market that's going to happen and get your groceries and stuff. So I think that also kind of helped. Like I really like took that in, like a lot of that
Hmm.
cultural sense of personal responsibility, and it kind of made me the one to kind of have to like to organize things, to plan things out. Yeah.
That's interesting because I think the cultural responsibilities in Indian culture are definitely there is a lot of responsibility, especially on the eldest child. And
Mm,
I think being the eldest daughter, there's even a different whole set of expectations and requirements. But I think one of the things that, you know, maybe you've experienced too, because you did have a younger sibling, is like being the one to take care of your siblings. That is an expectation that is in a lot of immigrant families, that
yeah.
you are expected to be the sub-in babysitter and help out
Hmm.
around the house when your parents are busy,
Yeah.
watch over your sister. I vividly remember one time I was told to watch my sister. I
Hmm.
must have been 7, which means she was like 3.
Wow.
And it was like when we had first moved to the US. It was in the within the first year, and we were renting this large like single family home. And I remember I was I don't remember what happened. I knew that I ultimately did not watch her because at some point my mom's like, "Where's your sister?"
No.
And I was like, "Oh." And I was like, "I didn't know." And we looked for her everywhere and she wasn't in the house.
What?
Only to then realize that the front door was slightly open and she
Oh
had walked
no.
out. And she later was brought back to the house. I don't remember by who exactly, but like she seemed fine. She was just holding her like, baby blanket and like sucking her thumb and just like dragging the thing everywhere. But like, I don't know what happened. I don't know how the door
Yeah.
was open. I don't know what I was doing. I think I might have been watching Fantasia for like the 100th
Watching your
time. I
favorite
don't know.
Disney film, 7-year-olds.
Something. But I remember I got in a lot of trouble because my mom's like, "You're supposed to be watching your sister." And I know now that the reason she was upset at me was because I knew that if my dad found out, my dad would lay into her around about it. And
Mm,
so she was kind of projecting a little bit of how
yeah.
upset that she was knows she was going to end up being once he talked to her. But I
Hmm.
was thinking to myself later on, and I was just like, why was I watching like a
Yeah.
3-year-old as a
A three
7-year-old?
as a 7-year-old. That is. That's incredibly young. After that experience, was the expectation lowered or was it kept the same about of being the babysitter in the house?
I mean, I got older, and so I do think that it as I entered my teens, it was more acceptable for me to be the babysitter. But I think I'm trying to remember if I ever remember like having that much responsibility where like she was in a position to actually get hurt if I wasn't focused on taking care of her. And I don't recall. And but then again, as I mentioned in a couple other episodes, I don't remember huge portions now of my childhood, so it could have very well have happened. I just don't have the context anymore on it. But I know that that expectation that was put on me as the eldest child, and also the one who, similar to yourself, had a tendency to be organized, had a
Hmm.
tendency to be the mediator. All of a sudden, there was all these other hats that I unknowingly somehow started wearing, and there weren't
Yeah.
necessarily expectations I had accepted. But you're a child. You don't think that you have a choice in taking
Hmm.
on these extra responsibilities. As I know, I used to get frustrated and say like, well, I just want to go do this, and I would get the answer from my parents, well, you have to help out, you have to help take care of your sister. And
Hmm.
that was just what I was told.
Would you say that that moment was the first moment we realized, oh, the expectations for me are much different than what are those of my sister? Was it at 7 or?
I don't think I knew it at 7. I probably realized it somewhere in my early teens. Because then I started realizing there was a weird double standard and I started getting angry about it.
Yeah.
And I was like, wait, like, why do I have to do these things and she doesn't have to do these things? And like, I'm a child, I don't know how to process my emotions, so like I'm letting it out on her, I'm letting it out on my
Yeah.
parents, and like really like it's not my sister's fault, but I projected that because I was just like, you should be doing what I'm doing, why am I doing this?
Yeah. That brings a memory to the front of my mind. In the East Coast, and a lot of West Coast listeners probably don't know about this or have had to do it, but snow shoveling was a big part of getting to work, getting to school. And in order to make money, like as a kid, to like afford video games, Pokemon cards, you name it, like things like that. We didn't have an allowance. It was you pretty much had to work. So like at like 11 or 12 is when I would walk over to the dentist's office and shovel snow for them in the morning, early in the morning when it was super cold, below 20 degrees.
How much would you
Worst
get?
worst activity ever. Not only that, like the sidewalk wasn't level and it had cracks in it, so you had to be really careful when you shoveled it. It was miserable. And if I didn't do a good job, the dentist would let me know that, oh, this wasn't that good. And it was like every time I did, I think I either got like $3 every morning I did that, and then I would go up to like $6. Like that was the big promotion.
That's it.
For a kid, that's kind of a lot of that's a good money. And I would go to GameStop and be able to afford a lot of different games. But as I got older, once I kind of I picked up another job, I was going to give that job to my little brother, and he like there was this expectation that like this job that my family got for us needs to pass down to the next one, and then when they get old enough, then they pass it on to the next kid in the neighborhood or whatever. My little brother could not wake up in the morning, just could not wake up to do this job, and it was like maybe a week or two of him trying to do it. He stopped doing it, and there was just no fuss from the parents. Whereas, and that's where I got really frustrated. Like, wait, there's this double standard here. You made me do this for 3 or 4 years, and he doesn't have to do it, and then he just gets to enjoy the video games that I buy from all the money I got from snow shoveling. So yeah, that was like the earliest moment where I was like, oh, there's different expectations for each of us, like my older brother, my little brother, and what they expected us to be able to do.
Yeah, I think that was the part that got to me, is that maybe I wasn't cognizant of the high expectations that were put on me, but I
Yeah.
was very cognizant of the lack of expectations that were
Yes.
put on my younger sibling,
Yeah.
which is such a strange way to think about it.
Hmm.
um,
Yeah.
like I was so focused on that, on the part that felt more indignant to me was not so much what was being done to me, but what
Hmm.
like somebody else wasn't doing too.
Yeah. It's hard to when you're a kid because you don't know, you don't have like, we didn't have Reddit or whatever back then to like ask other kids, are you guys doing this? Like, oh, your parents are not making you do this? Like, so like the only way you can turn is to where it doesn't match up, and that'd be your sibling. Like, oh, this is, they don't have this expectation, but I do. There's something's not right here.
Something's not mathing.
My sibling's lazy, or like whatever whatever you think is going on, like in your mind. But in reality, is like your parents know, like, well, we we know that you can do it, but we know he can't. So this is the situation.
It's like that's it. I don't agree with those expectations, but
Yeah,
I see now why you have those expectations of me.
yeah.
Um, if we take that from the East Coast over here to the West Coast now as like working professionals,
Hmm.
and you know, with leadership, project management, and even some of the stuff in Silicon Valley, what do you think, you know, happens, or what do you think you experience, maybe emotionally, physically, mentally, when you're not meeting expectations, your own expectations or other people's expectations of you?
I mean, in the past, it definitely felt like an attack on character because
Mm,
like you tie that expectation so much to your upbringing. Like you grew up with being the responsible one, being the organized one. So if you get told that you're not organized, that's like an attack on your own character, and you get really defensive about it. I used to have to step back and be like, wait, it's okay. Like there are times or things going in your life that may make you disorganized, or the situation of whatever you're working on, the project, whatever, it could be disorganized in nature. That doesn't mean that you yourself is disorganized or less than. And I think early on in my career, I definitely had to I struggle with that. Um, and hearing that criticism, and instead of like taking it as feedback, being defensive about it. I don't know if you experienced the same.
yeah, I think what I eventually had to come to realize is that I have incredibly high expectations of myself.
Hmm.
And I think what had happened, whether or not I was conscious of doing it, is that I had translated those expectations to others, making bars that people should meet that maybe A, they didn't agree to, they don't even know about, and that are solely my own bars. And so I had to walk that back because I was starting to get irritated. And it's like, wait a
Hmm.
minute, like it's not their fault. And,
Yeah.
you know, maybe that is not what is a top priority to them, and their
Yeah.
expectations are slightly different. So I had to go through my evolution of that. And I think understanding that there can be two things true at the same time, like as
Yeah.
you mentioned around like being criticized at, in one moment for your organization skills, like that can be true. But the same thing can also be true is that you are organized person. Like those are actually still two truths and they can occupy the same space.
Yeah. I found myself early on having high expectations. So, like coming from the East Coast to West Coast, the way that the East Coast works is very,
Yes.
very like a kind of almost like Germany, like personal responsibility. You get something assigned, you get it done, no complaints, and then little recognition. And then the West Coast is more recognition, more understanding, more like assume good intent type things. And I struggled with that initially, and then I overcorrected, where I was like giving my expectations for others were so low that I was taking on things from them that they would be able to do, or they wanted to do. I would just take in
Oh,
responsibility because I'm like, oh, they're not going to want to. I don't think they can do it, or I don't think they're going to do it the way that I would do it. So let me do it. And I think I've had to shift that back into somewhere in the middle, where it's the healthy medium, where it's not too low or too high.
that That's a really interesting way to look at it. And I think, it means that I think when whether they're your own expectations or other expectations people may have of you, I think there is some sense of like initial gut punch, like disappointment and
Hmm.
blame. And then, you kind of sit with that feeling and then you're like, you work through it and hopefully like you're not kind of spiraling in it.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you understand like the broader context, able to make conclusions like you did that like no,
Hmm.
like, this is just one isolated situation. And or like sometimes it is in fact a reality check. I had a reality check probably a couple months back where I was realizing that my approach to leadership and management is probably a little bit more untraditional in the sense that I do really like focusing on developing like people as people and not just as career professionals,
Hmm.
because I think so much of career development is not necessarily about your technical skills. Everyone
Yeah.
will have the aptitude to grow those things. It's about the other stuff, how you
100%. Yeah.
the interpersonal things, the EQ things. And so I bring a lot of that into my leadership style, but it's not always reciprocated or welcomed. And
Hmm.
so I have to understand where to dial back a little bit without it
Yeah.
feeling like it's compromising my values of how I want to be a manager and how I want to
Yeah.
present myself. That's been a really interesting journey.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because only you like thinking about your expectations. You have, as a leader, you have to think about the people you're leading, their expectations, and if those two align, or if they're aware of each other. I
Yes.
feel so many times that a lot of disappointment or disagreement or even conflict in projects come about because that is not communicated what the expectations are between the two, whether it's um, report manager or project manager, team member. It could be between team members. I feel like that if you're not communicating enough or clearly enough, that can get missed in many
Yeah,
cases.
absolutely. Why do you think that is? Why do you think that people don't go forward to set those expectations or align on them?
Some people maybe they're like kind of like us. We were talking about as kids. We weren't aware that those expectations are even things that we operate on. Some people aren't aware. It could be cultural. It could be like we're in a company that spans across the globe, so we're not aware of all the cultural nuances of what are or upbringings that everyone went through. So it's really tough to know where your blind spots are as far as like is this a high expectation or is this
Reasonable.
like reasonable for what I'm asking for? I think that is a lot of the reason why there might be like why we don't share expectations. I would say in my cases, like I'm never like afraid to share the expectations. More so, I'm not aware which expectations are sound too obvious. Like, does it sound dumb that I'm saying, well, I expect you to come to meetings on time? Sometimes that you have to say that in a meeting or like with your team members to make sure that everyone's on the same page. Um,
I had to have a good laugh at that one because why is it that we have to remind people of that one?
yeah, yeah, that one's an interesting one. I mean, yeah, that could be regional, that could be cultural, that could be everything. That is something that I've had to shift the punctuality piece, like because that growing up that was almost trauma. Like I always had to
Mm,
be early and on time, and then uh, my wife's family, it's a huge big family, and they just getting organized and getting to a place is very difficult. So they show up late to things all the time. So I had to be like, okay, we're gonna get there. It's gonna be fine. Things are gonna be okay if we get there at the certain time. I'll try my best to herd the cats, like or like get folks to get out the door, but not expect to be there early. It's it's something I've had to grow on, grow on for sure.
how did you get there? How did you come to like understand and let go of that
I
push to
think
meet the
the other piece is like acceptance, like accepting. I think like expectations is very outcome. High expectations very outcome focused. Um, if you flip it and just accept that things will be okay, like the small things, like the small things will be okay. If someone's 1 or 2 minutes late, things will be okay. Um, it will not change the course of a
yeah.
project or a family event. Things will be okay. Not to get too but I guess you at the same time don't be too apathetic about it, like your expectations, because then if you have no expectations, then especially in project management, that's when you get
Yeah.
your in dangers, your at risk type projects. You know? It has to be a very like even balance. Getting there is kind of like modeling after you and your projects or other peers that I'm seeing in their projects, how they act when things don't go the way they should, and other leaders in other spaces that you like that we admire, how they handle those situations, um, understanding how they react to those type of situations help me kind of put myself like in that medium state, you know.
You bring up a really good point because so much is dependent on privilege. I think that's the right word. The privilege you
Mm-hmm.
have of the leaders that you're surrounded with
Yeah.
to understand and have a chance to see examples of great leadership, examples of okay leadership, and then
Mm-hmm.
examples of maybe not so great leadership, because those are the cautionary tales. And we've been both very lucky to report into the same manager for a long time, and
Yeah.
I think it's seeing how others handle expectations. There's a lot you can learn just by observing, and I've always
Yeah.
been the people watcher person. Like, I like going sitting down and like people watching when I'm in like public places.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things to do when I would go into New York City, is go into
Yeah.
Central Park, go to like the Bethesda fountain, just sit down and just like watch how people
Yeah.
interact with each other.
Just imagine the lives they may be living and where they're going and what's on the agenda today. Things like that. Yeah, well, people watching is always a fun but creepy hobby to have.
So do you think it's fair to say that evolving as a leader, evolving in your role, has meant becoming more flexible and more discerning and curious about expectations and being open to what that may mean for
Absolutely.
different people?
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like it's shifted a lot since we've been working with folks more globally. Like now I'm working with Europeans, so like they're like it's kind of come full circle. Now I'm working with Europeans that are punctual, have that sense of self responsibility. So if I don't match that expectation, there could be conflict on that end as well. So um, it is I guess the key is just being communicative of what you think is acceptable or not in your work, and that's kind of how it's changed in my career. The more folks that I work with, the more I learn like that there could be blind spots that I was not aware of in my projects that we're fine in other ones just because we had aligned on those expectations implicitly without having to communicate with one another. And then you hop into another project and then you realize, oh wait, timelines are supposed to be met, like things like that, or like I don't know, it's like small things here and there, or like yeah, providing great updates or letting you know that you're not going to make a meeting, things like that. And that's not to say like all the projects I'm working on right now are like on fire and terrible and no one's doing the work. I'm just saying that there's every project has their own like their own nuance to it, as far as what our expectations
Yeah.
in the
And,
team are.
I think in the context of, our like domain and project management, I have an interesting anecdote I want to share, and I'm curious what you think about this theory I have. But I think it occurred to me, I don't know, I want to say within the last year, I realized I was through some of the work I've done in therapy, I was like, yeah, I have these crazy high expectations that my parents were constantly putting on me. And they've that amongst with other experiences have developed this unique individual that is Hanisha. And I've put myself into a job, into a role that has me continue doing a lot of the stuff that I would do as a child:
Yeah,
organize things,
yeah,
schedule things, risk manage, things like that. And I'm just like, it almost, I wasn't sure how to think about it as like, should I be happy that I found something that I'm
hmm,
really good at, but it came from a weird place?
yeah,
Or is it actually kind of really weird that I've managed to land on something that's almost like exactly why I was traumatized as a child?
yeah. That is fascinating. That is fascinating to think about. It's almost like you've turned it into a superpower, like which once was. I mean, it's trauma, but you've used the trauma and what it's taught, like what you've experienced through it, is helping you in your career. It is shaping you in that career. It's fascinating. I mean, like that's getting on a philosophical angle. Had we all been met with the right expectation as kids, would we have any project managers? Would we have any folks that were leaders? I don't know. Like that is a good question to ponder.
Do you feel like the things that whether it be expectations or some other like dimensions of how you grew up has very much made you kind of, I hesitate to use the word like born for this role, but kind of like
Yeah,
harnessed and forged for this role?
yeah, absolutely. I remember early in my career, working on the help desk, working IT desktop support, and naturally just wanting to organize or like plan things. Like, hey, you told me this date, I should write that down, and where it didn't come as naturally to other folks, who may excel in other ways, where there's like, oh, if something broke and they knew how to crowd over it and fix it immediately, that's a huge superpower to have. For me, it was kind of like organizing. I think a lot of it is being the mediator in the family. Is like
Yes.
I connecting folks and information was like this goes back to like the people watching piece. Like I would when I went to kindergarten, I didn't know any English. I was not prepared whatsoever for my first day of school. And the only way I learned English without like later on I did get a speech pathologist to help me out, but it was like second or third grade, was to observe. And then I think that kind of shaped me in a way where I would just observe and like, oh wait, this kid's having like I would watch conflict because was so much more important to watch if you don't know what
Yes.
it's about. So you're like
Yes.
watching behavior, you're watching body language. As a kid, you're like, I want to steer away from that. I don't want to get anyone upset, like things like that. So I would, growing up, just be really good at like bridging gaps or like mediating or like getting folks together in rooms and stuff. And I think that's like a huge piece of being a project manager is really connecting information. You hear something from one department, oh, this might impact us. Let me tell my team
Mm,
members, things like that. It's not just the organizational punctuality piece. It's a lot of the like being that mediator or that the organ, like I don't even know how to this that's not the organizer, but being the connector in your work. I don't know if you felt that growing up.
yeah, I think so. And you actually brought up a really interesting point around language, because observing is so important, especially if you don't speak the native language, because it's
Hmm.
not just about the words they're saying, it's the tone they're delivering it in. And
Yeah.
German has a completely different approach than
Yeah.
English.
Yeah.
And so you could say something, we have like, definitely had a couple coworkers who are like, say something one way, but because English isn't their native language, there's a lot of people who will misinterpret what that individual
Yeah.
is saying. And so it's really fascinating that your skills from observation and like people watching at a time when you needed to assimilate kind of developed this pattern of making the connections, connecting the dots, and that
Hmm.
carries with you now into
Yeah.
adulthood.
Yeah,
And
that's really well put. Yeah, that's something I didn't realize until I got into project management. It was kind of like when you were kind of like telling me about project management. I think you could fit into this. You were seeing me do the things that project managers do, and you're like, I think this was. I'm like, I don't know, I'm not sure. And then like when you're doing that career shift, you kind of look at your whole upbringing, your life. You're like, why does this career fit for me? And you kind of um, look back in your life, and that's when it kind of came to me. I was like, oh, this is why I excel at doing this particular thing, is because of my upbringing or the way I've had to assimilate in the U.S. Um, yeah.
that's incredibly powerful because sometimes what you're good at, what you do is not maybe what's naturally easy for you to do.
Hmm.
Sometimes there is a misalignment in your workplace and you don't get the privilege of having those things align.
Yeah.
And I've always considered myself extremely lucky when I eventually landed in project management, that I was like, oh, like this just makes sense. This just clicks and
Hmm.
I'm good at it and I can be
Yeah.
paid for it. Fantastic.
Right.
But like I didn't know about anything about project management until like it was I was in the like, the support role, and Pablo was moving into project management,
Hmm.
and I was like, what is this space? Like what is this? People can, and it was, I think, the naive maybe opinion at first was like, oh, it's kind of like being an admin. It's not like very complicated. No,
Yeah.
the couldn't be far from reality. And I think that has to do with all of the people aspects of it. Is like,
Hmm.
we're given a very complicated job to manage projects, manage people without having any authority over them.
Yeah.
And that, yeah, to your point, like we needed that skill set that we developed in order to be successful in those roles. Or you could say we are successful at those roles because we've done it
Hmm.
before.
Yeah. It'd be fascinating to know if I feel like there could be a future where instead of like you kind of fumbling about through college and trying to figure out where do I fit, what career should I pick, you kind of like has some kind of assessment or some kind of reading, like almost like a psychic reading that'll tell you like, oh, because of these experiences, these are the roles that might fit well for you, you know.
Yeah,
um
based on your like life
yeah.
experiences through
Okay, maybe not
childhood.
to say like based on your trauma this is going to be a great job for you now, but something more like, based on these experiences you've had growing up, I feel like firefighter would be great, or project manager or software engineer.
Yeah. No, I wonder too though, because I think the part of my expectations that were put on me as a child is to pursue, the STEM path. Like that is
Hmm.
where success is, that's where the money is, and prestige and whatever culturally relevant
Mm,
thing. And
yeah.
so I'm not going to be a doctor. So I was like, okay, let's go do maybe, and I was like, oh, engineering. Then obviously I ended up more in the science space, but thinking about it, all the pivots I've taken were because I thought I had the expectations I was putting either were getting from others, so like getting from my parents, or the
Yeah.
expectations I started producing for myself, where I was like, yeah, but like I should make money, I should do this. And I have so much respect for individuals who chose career paths that were not in STEM, because how
Yeah.
brave must they have
Yeah.
been in order to
Absolutely.
choose something and for their parents to support them. It's
Hmm.
probably a little bit more common now, but it definitely was not common for me.
Yeah, like for me growing up, engineering was the thing that they were pushing me towards. And then once I got into college, I was like, well, this like working with computers is really fun and software and things like that. And it was very hard for my parents to understand. They come from
Hmm.
a generation where they 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 were already adults when they like the personal computer came about, you know. So for them to understand understand the change from mechanical engineering into IT, that was a little bit tougher for them. I do give them a lot of credit; they were very accepting of that change, because they saw how passionate I was, and luckily I had the opportunity at the college I was working at. A lot of the folks that were working in the IT department there were from different um, backgrounds, different majors. You know, like mechanical engineering, you got electrical engineering, we had IT, we had folks that weren't even in any STEM related majors that were in our IT department. Um, it made me understand like, oh, this IT kind of has this interesting like cross functional nature to it. If you look at our even our like organization, a lot of folks do they come from all walks
Yeah.
of life and all different types of schooling or non-schooling that and have been very successful in this in this field.
And each of them brings a different and unique perspective
Yeah.
into the work that they do. And, you know, maybe taking a shift out of maybe the more professional world and kind of dabbling back into the personal world, obviously newly married for a year. How has expectations changed in the context of relationships? Maybe not just with your wife, but maybe like friendships and things like that. Especially as, getting older and how, people having families.
Yeah, I was gonna mull this one over for a bit. I because I grew up the way I did, I had a hard time making friends because I didn't know English. I was the outsider. I didn't have family or cousins nearby to hang out with. And then naturally you hang out with your cousins, you make friends across the street and stuff like
That's
that.
true.
I didn't have any of that. I grew up very isolated, and because of that, my expectations for having friends were very low.
Hmm.
Friends coming through for you, or friends being there
A
for you in
reliable.
hard times, relying on them, because it was just me and my we were so family focused. It was just me and my brothers. It was like that was it. Like that's all we had. We're the only ones on the block that were biracial. We almost felt like we're on an island and we're all kind of hanging out together. So I was really close to my brothers, and then realizing that that still impacts me a little today, where like if I have to ask someone for a favor, it almost feels like I'm cutting a piece of myself out to ask for this favor because it's so painful to do it. And I think it's my expectations from others, because I know how much that's going on in their lives and things. I've grown on that because I realize like sometimes people want to show up for you, like
Yes.
people want to be there for you, and not to always just kind of be there to chat or like hang out. It can be more than that. Um, my as you met my wife, she's amazing, and I feel like my expectations, like meeting her, I had no idea that a person like her existed, so I like did not know what to expect, and I was completely blown away, and how much her family upbringing aligned with my family upbringing, um, being um, being biracial, being multilingual, um, and that's kind of why we gelled so much. Like I think really the pressure cooker was kind of being stuck in a one bedroom apartment during the pandemic for 2 to 3 years and not killing each other. I feel like that spoke volumes about our relationship and
You're
how
like,
aligned
check,
we
we're
are.
good.
Yeah, we're good. We can survive in a tiny space. I was working from there too. It was a bedroom, and I was working from there at the same time. And we made it through there. Yeah, I don't know how you feel about, like, I know that you've mentioned in the past that you've had high expectations for your friends because they've been such a core part of your your family, you know.
Yeah, that's something I've definitely had to unwind because the expectations I had were maybe more misaligned as a child because I would expect
Mm-hmm.
them to present and show up for me in the way a family member should, and that's
Mm-hmm.
obviously not reasonable as a child.
Yeah.
So I would get angry at people who like change plans and reschedule things or cancel things, and uh, I've come out of that a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
understanding why I was even doing that in the first place is I was craving connection, I was craving stability, and I wasn't getting it from my family, and so I was seeking it out outside of my family, and that became why friends has become such a like core value for me, and why I believe in the concept of chosen family is because my chosen family are my friends, because the
Mm-hmm.
expectations I had of what family are were kind of polluted a little bit
Yeah.
by my experiences. And so I had to come up with new expectations and find almost, at least at the time, an unhealthy way to reassociate those expectations onto another class of people, which were friends. Now
Yeah.
I'm a little bit more like balanced about it. And I think having a space to understand like what I really need and like why I was acting that way has helped a
Yeah.
lot, like through the years of work I've done in therapy. And I think like the having a family like the way I did, I also developed a lot of unhealthy ways to like support my family members that were more based in codependency.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I have very much present tense carried some of that over into, my friendships and even with my relationship with my fiance. But
Mm-hmm.
I am working on that, like, and I try to now find ways to put the boundaries down, make better expectations that are more grounded in healthy relationship
Yeah.
patterns, and I'm very grateful that all the friends who have supported me, yourself included, through adjusting those boundaries have been
Yeah.
very, very supportive. My fiance has been very, very supportive of understanding that he has to change a little bit as I like put those boundaries down.
Yeah.
And so it's I think been an evolution to understand that like expectations are not commandments, and they shouldn't really be
No.
commandments. um
No.
the more flexible they are, it doesn't mean that you're a pushover. It doesn't mean that you have lack of expectations. It just means that you understand like the human factor. You understand that like everyone's here just trying to do their best, and
Mm-hmm.
every situation's different. Every person
Yeah.
is different.
Yeah. And yeah, even the small things like being able to brush those off. Something you said earlier really struck to me is it's powerful that you're able to identify that you kind of have those high expectations or had those high expectations, because almost so much of that is like the underlying code that a lot of us run on. Some of that stuff you don't know until you've already done it. The, like modeling or like having high expectations.
Yeah, and I think in my case, the high expectations cost me a lot of really great friends. Um, and even thinking back on it, like, I realized where I went wrong, why those friends did what they needed to do, and kind of stepped back from the friendship. But it's a lesson forged in uh, a lot of pain and a lot of tears, and a lot of work.
Yeah.
uh, what do you think? What does letting go of expectations, is that even something that exists for you right now? Is not even expectations like adjusting them, but actually just letting go? Is there any scenarios you have where you actually let go of expectations that you may have?
Hmm. That is a good question. Letting go. I think a lot of it was like kind of still affects me now. Like I was mentioning how close I am to my family. We were kind of the family isolated on the block, the weird Germans and no other Germans in the neighborhood. And it really gutted my family when I decided to move to the West Coast, even though they were very happy I did it,
Mm.
because we're all so tight knit. I've had to let go of the expectation that we won't be together, like across the street from each other our entire lives. But not just letting go of that, but adjusting it. The reality is, like, now we do. Like once I moved to the West Coast, I made a very important point to meet with my brothers every year, and then meet with my family every year. And then now we've transformed it into what we call our family reunion, which, like, most family reunions are huge. Ours are like less than 10 people, you know. But we get a cabin out in Oregon, and we get together, and we spend valuable, like, time
Yeah.
together. And I think that's so much more important than being right across the street from each other, because folks can be across the street from each other. And there were times when I was in Rochester where I didn't feel connected to my family as I do now, where I'm having, like just next week, my parents are coming to visit, and having dedicated time to hang out with us, and talk, and just, it's not really letting go. It's just like that image, or the image I had in my mind of what that future would look like, has changed, and accepting that
Yeah.
change. Unless I win the lottery, and then I would get a farm, and then all of my family and everyone could live on this farm.
The farm in Hawaii, right?
Yes, the farm in Hawaii with the guava trees, the macadamia trees, all of that.
I think it's incredibly powerful that what you mentioned around letting go or changing or just kind of accepting those expectations around, like, we're so tied to your core value of family. And I think maybe unknowingly, something I'm still working on letting go of. I'm not there yet. Is I'm still working on letting go of the childhood I didn't get.
Yeah,
Uh and I see a lot of really cool reels these days on Instagram from, Gen X, older millennials who have children, and these children are starting to learn very high levels of emotional intelligence.
yeah,
And these parents are having very candid conversations and helping them process their feelings, and,
yeah.
like, showing up for their kids in a way that I wish I could have. And I think part of me is still mourning, still grieving the
Yeah,
expectations of what I should have gotten as a
yeah.
family, as a
It's
child.
that's a fascinating flip, to have that feeling of an expectation not being met from the past, like something that's already happened, not
Yeah.
being what you expect to, based on what you've seen other families have got. Like, I feel the same way. Like, my little brother, he's a stay-at-home dad. He plays with his daughters all day, and I could count on, like, one hand how many times my dad, because of work or just the generational thing, like how many times he's been able to, like, play with us. And the moments he did, like whether it be tennis or basketball, were so impactful to me. And like, I am also trying to let go of that. Like, man, the kids now, they got it good. Like, what my nieces are like. I mean, they're amazing, and their emotional intelligence is amazing already. And it's just so, it is nice to see them hang out with their dad, like, all day, and play, and just have a great time, and be a kid, like, not have those high expectations, be able to have the expectations you would put on a child, which is just play, and, like, not be incredibly mean to your sister, or like things like that, like the basics, not be the babysitter for a 3-year old, or be the translator for your family, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you brought up an interesting point about how your brother shows up as a father, and, like, how you would have, what you cherished and remembered from your father showing up for you is, like, that's a very closely intertwined part of letting go of just everything I've had to process in the past. Is I'm also trying to let go of what I wanted my parents to be. Like some of it's
Hmm.
the childhood aspect of it, but some of them is they're individually as people who they could
Yeah.
have been for me. Cause, I've mentioned this before, but like my sister gets a completely different version of my mom. She gets a
Yeah.
very, very supportive, very motherly version of my mom. And I don't know if I've gotten that version. And we have our
Hmm.
own things we're working through. And
Yeah.
so that makes me sad sometimes that I
Yeah.
never got that. And, I'm learning to let go of that. And I'm probably one of the most important things I'm learning to let go of is the like it's fair to say it's like the anger I have at maybe
Yeah.
not having what I should have had. It's not just grief, it's not just remorse. It's also just like I'm part of me still angry and those expectations are still sitting with me and I'm not
Hmm.
fully through them quite yet. So I think it's
Yeah.
really beautiful that you were able to work through like something that's so fundamentally core to you with your own family and like find a way to like yeah, just because we're not together in the physical presence like day to day doesn't mean we don't make very meaningful, very
Yeah.
intentional decisions to get together once a year and like actually have a very rich and meaningful experience instead of maybe more superficial that you would if you kind
Yeah.
of take it for granted on a more day-to-day basis. And I think one quick anecdote I did want to share was I think being at your wedding was a really cool exploration of expectations that I had for what that may look like for me one day,
Yeah.
and realizing that it it can be small, it can be intimate. I don't have to meet other people's expectations for what a wedding should be.
Yeah.
I can decide for myself what that looks like based on what I value the most. My hairdresser, I saw her 2 weeks ago, and she was leaving for a trip to Italy, and she eloped. And they got some amazing photos at St. Peter's Basilica, and they just went ahead and did it. And I was like, oh my gosh, how did your in laws take it? And she told me, she's like, well, my mother in law wasn't too happy about it. And she
Yeah.
was like, she had to work through that. And she kind of tried to throw a bone by asking her to come with her dress shopping, and so that kind of helped like ease things over a little bit. And I was just like, wow, like talk about like being so courageous to drop the bomb on somebody else's expectations and be authentic to
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah. You could do a whole podcast on wedding expectations alone. A lot of people are different, and that ties in culturally too. I realized like my mom, her expectations like were based on what she saw in movies, because in Germany they don't have this wedding industry that we have in the US, with
Right.
like the bachelorette party, the bridal party, the groom, and the whole ceremony, and the everything essentially. And so like we my wife and I were really intentional about making that ceremony just in very like bring close ones, close friends, close family together, and have a um, very very close ceremony. It did come at a cost. There were folks that were upset they weren't able to go. Unfortunately, my wife's family is huge. Financially, we could not afford to have fit to 100 to 150 people come. And then my expectation, I kind of put that on myself. The expectation in my family for a wedding was low, because when my mother and father got married, they were married and no one was there, just friends. Their families could not make it or were not supportive of the marriage, so they kind of did alone. My older brother got married in Vegas on a very short timeline, so only my mother was able to make it. And then my little brother got married in April 2020. So it was a Facebook Live event. No one could go because of the pandemic. So the expectation was like,
Uh-huh.
Maybe a little bit they were expecting. Well, oh, well, Kevin will get it done. We can finally have this moment where we get together, and I think maybe that's the expectation. I knew that I needed to bring the family together for this moment because we had missed it so many times in different generations, and that's kind of how we went about it. But like there were things like having like like having a massive event with a DJ and all these things that I mean some people that's very important. We were more focused on that core thing where we're just like having time with all of our loved ones, and that kind of helped us plan that wedding.
Yeah. I I still stand by my statement. It was by far one of the most beautiful weddings I have ever been
Thank
to.
you. Gotta let Caitlin know.
So from childhood to our, working professional lives to our personal lives, I'll kind of wrap up here and ask you the question, and feel free to volley it back to me after. So, what is at the root of expectations for you?
The root of expectations, I would say, is I guess like everything that was expected of you. It's a mirror almost. If you don't manage it or you're not aware of it, it's like it reflects back. Whatever is expected of you, you expect of others. Like we're just taking the example of us as children. Like we expect the same thing of our siblings that were expected of us. Um, I would say that's kind of the root of it. Really, the key is to kind of be aware of that and then adjust and have the empathy, the EQ to know that other folks do not have those same expectations because they grew up differently. They didn't have the same experiences as you. So I would say that would be the root of it. What about you? What do you think?
I feel like it's gone through an evolution even within the context of this episode. And the word I keep landing on, which I don't think is all encompassing, but just kind of maybe is indicative of where my mindset's at now at the end of this, is I think at the root of expectations is actually assumptions.
Mm,
I think and
yeah,
and I don't know what you would call when you go and get those expectations validated and they become something other than an assumption, but I feel like at a whole right now in the world maybe is the fact that expectations are largely assumptions.
yeah. I feel like once you're able to when those expectations are communicated and like it's understanding is the next phase. That if two people understand, like they know the expectations of one another, that's when you meet understanding. But yeah, you're right. Expectations are the assumptions you make
I like
of
that.
others, your outcomes, life, everything.
I like that once you have aligned on expectations, they become understandings.
Yeah.
But I think until then, they are untested and untried assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I very much appreciate your time today, Kevin, and thank you for sitting down with me and talking about expectation.
Thanks for inviting me and love the conversation.
Yeah. If anyone here wants to hear more from Kevin and has a topic in mind, please feel free to let me know or drop a comment below, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah. Thank you.